Last week I bought this bargain bumper bag of lenses from eBay. It was a very cheap buy, but inside the bag I found something a little bit special. To find out what it was, stay tuned. Well, hey everybody, thank you for checking in once again and welcome to another episode. So I've been playing on eBay and I bought a very cheap bag of lenses. It wasn't terribly well described, it wasn't terribly well photographed, but I could see that in that bag was one of my dream lenses, and just in one corner of one of the images I could just identify this lens that's one of my absolute favorites. So I bought the bag, and when it arrived I checked it to see whether I was right and whether that was in fact my dream lens that had arrived through the post. And indeed it was. It was this lens. This is one of the nicest lenses I've ever shot. This is a Minolta MD 135mm f2.8, but this is not the special thing. In fact, it's quite a bit less than special, because when I looked at this lens closely through a strong light, I could see that the rear element was very, very cloudy indeed, and unfortunately it's cloudy on the inside. Now usually that wouldn't be too much of a problem, however I'll show you why this might be a problem. So there's the rear of the lens, and I don't know if you can see that there's a cloudy sort of covering on the inner surface there. You might be able to just see it reflecting in the light. Now then, what we need to do is take out this rear element. It's held in by screws. The rear optical block is held in by 4 screws, but unfortunately the rear optical block is all glued together, so I'm going to have a very tough time fixing this lens up. I'm going to give it a go, because apparently you can get this first element out of the plastic casing if you're very clever and dexterous with your fingers and Dremels and so on, so I'll have a go at it. But unfortunately this, one of my dream lenses, one of the nicest lenses I've ever shot, was not in very good condition, and that's a real shame. So I was a little bit disappointed to see that. In all other respects it's really nice, it's in very good condition cosmetically, as you've just seen. It's in very nice condition mechanically, everything turns nicely and easily and cleanly. We've got the slightly clanky Minolta aperture dial on the back there. And in all other respects than that rear element, this is a really nice lens. It's one of the nicest lenses I've shot. As I say, I borrowed a lens like this. A viewer was kind enough to lend me a copy of this lens some years ago, and I never forgot how nice it was. It was very kind of her to send it to me, and eventually I had to send them back, but I never forgot how nice this lens is. So when I saw it advertised, I thought, right, I'm going to have one of those. Unfortunately, it's going to take a little work before I can fix this one up. So although I hoped this would be the special thing, it wasn't. However, the bag didn't disappoint. Let me show you what else was in it, because there are lots of little bits and pieces in it. I'll show you what else was in it. First of all, there is this Fujifilm FinePix 2 megapixel. Gosh, proudly says 2 megapixel on its front there, and we can see over here, if we can get some focus, we can see that over here. So back in the 2000s or thereabouts, this camera will have been somebody's, I don't know, pride and joy, and they will have taken it everywhere, but it's no use now because it's got all sorts of proprietary connections which don't exist anymore, I don't suppose. That was a kind of an interesting little thing to find in there. There was also this camera, the Vivitar P5 to 35, or is it PS35? Yeah, PS35. So there's a point and shoot from Vivitar. I'll just give you a quick look over here. Little point and shoot from the 1980s. Open up the cover. Does it have a nice 2.8 lens? No, it doesn't. It's got a 3.5, but that's okay. It's a nice focal length of 38 millimeters, so it's just nice to use on the street. It's a nice compact little machine, and I guess it would be a nice little film camera to use and just take out and about. It takes 2 AA batteries, so you'll never find yourself without a battery. You can get batteries, get AA batteries anywhere in the world. So that's a nice little camera from the 1980s, nice little point and shoot. Not quite as nice as my Nikon L35AF, but a nice little camera nevertheless. Right, well, we've got 2 more lenses in here. Let's check out the next one. Okay, when I first saw this lens, I was very intrigued. It's a very small 135, I think it's an f2.8. Yes, it's an f2.8. It's got a filter on it, and it's got some beautiful big glass elements in there. This is the Mamiya Secor CS 135mm f2.8. Now, I don't know what the CS system was, whether it was a medium format system, whether it was a 35mm system. It's got a bayonet mount, which I'll show you in a moment, but I don't know what system this lens was for. I'd very much like to shoot it. It looks like a nice little lens. I've shot Mamiya lenses before, and I found them to be very nice, so I would like to shoot this lens. So if anybody knows how I can mount this onto, well, any mirrorless camera really, Fuji X or Sony E-mount, the Mamiya CS system bayonet mount. Let's have a closer look over here. Okay, there's the lens, and there's its markings. I'll show you the markings on it in case you can help me identify the system it was from. Look at that beautiful big front element there with all those coatings. That's what makes me think this will be a nice lens. Lots and lots of very deep, very rich coatings. I don't know if you can see, but there is, unfortunately, you can just see it at the top here a little bit. Whoops, got the pass sticker off, stuck on my finger. A little bit of separation here between the first 2 elements, and that's unfortunate. It means that this lens is sadly on the way out, but I might be able to get some use out of it if I can mount it to something, if I can figure out a way of mounting it to something. Focus, please. Come on. Thank you. So yeah, I may be able to figure out a way of mounting it to something. There's the bayonet mount at the back. So I don't think that is a mount that is shared with any other system. It does look like a proprietary Mamiya mount. Everything moves and works very nicely on this lens. It's a really lovely mechanically it's a lovely lens. That aperture ring is very, very smooth. No half stops with this one, just single stops. It's got a little snacky open and shut hood, and that's really handy for keeping the rays away from the glass and stopping contrast dropping. But a very, very small lens. I'm really impressed with how small this lens is. It's a very, very compact system. I'm thinking this is for an SLR system. It just kind of feels like an SLR lens to me. The throat of the lens is not very large. It's no larger than any other 35mm lens that I've used, I don't think. So I'd say this is a 35mm lens, but if you know what it's for and how I can adapt it, please let me know. I'd very much like to know in the comments. So this could yet be a special thing Who knows? Time will tell. Okay, well, my bargain buy from eBay isn't doing too well up to now. I've got the dream lens that I've wanted, but with a possibly unrepairable cloudy rear element. That's this one, the Minolta. I've got a lovely lens that I probably can't use, the Mamiya Seiko lens. However, let's see what the third lens was. Or indeed is, because the third lens is the special thing. Now, you may recognize this lens from its shape, although possibly not from its markings. This lens is marked as the Pentacon 135mm f2.8. However, this is not just any old 135 2.8. This is a rebadged Maya Orestor 135mm f2.8. This is the old Maya Optic Orestor lens, rebodied by Pentacon when Maya were absorbed into the massive VEB Pentacon state optical concern in the old East Germany. So this is a really nice lens, and I was very, very pleased to get it. It's not a particularly expensive or valuable lens. They go for around, well, the Maya versions go for around 50, 60, 70 pounds on eBay. They've got the zebra finish. These possibly slightly plainer ones, Pentacon ones, these go a lot cheaper. These go for 20 to 40 pounds. However, it's actually a really nice lens. I wasn't sure what to expect of it. It's a fairly old, long lens, a 135 2.8, so I thought perhaps it was going to be a little bit soft. There were going to be lots of optical compromises in its design, and I really wasn't sure how it would eventually work out. I do have a great deal of respect for Maya Optic lenses. They're a very old name in lens manufacturing. They were a very old, esteemed and renowned company, and they certainly knew their onions when it comes to lenses, if that's not too mixed a metaphor. This is a really nicely made lens, and it shoots really nicely as well. I'll show you a little more closely over here. So there is the Pentacon or slash Maya lens, and it's a really, really nice thing. It's beautifully made. This is a really lovely feeling focus ring. It's very, very smooth and buttery and lovely and soft in its operation. It has a very long focus throw of, gosh, let's try and gauge it. That is 360 degrees near as damn it. So that's a long focus throw, but it does mean that you can get very accurate focusing with this lens. You can make very small and very accurate adjustments. There is the front element, nice big front element, and inside you will be able to see, I hope, 15 aperture blades. Look at that. That's one of the reasons this lens is special. It's got 15 aperture blades, so that whatever aperture you set your lens to, the circle made by the aperture, the opening made by the aperture stays circular. You can stop it right the way down to f32, which this lens goes down to, and the aperture remains circular. And what that means is that when you stop down, you don't get hexagons or octagons from point light sources, you get circles, and generally that's held to be a good thing. You might like hexagons or octagons in the background blur, and I don't mind them myself, but many photographers will tell you that what you really want is round specular highlights at all aperture openings, and this lens can provide that. It's quite heavy and it's fairly large. Let's compare it to the later lens I've got here, the Helios, and we'll see that it's actually slightly taller, just very slightly I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? It's just very slightly taller than the Helios. So although it does give the impression of a big lens, of being a big lens, that's because it's a very heavy lens. So there must be an awful lot of metal used in its construction. I don't think there's any plastic used anywhere. This is the Maya Optic Orastor in a different body. I can't see there any changes have been made to it. The coatings are said to be different and a little more modern. As for how it shoots, this lens shoots really, really nicely. As I say, really wasn't sure what to expect from this lens. It's an old 135, it's an old design, it's a wide aperture, it's a fast lens, so I thought the best I could hope for at maximum aperture was rather soft images, but I was wrong. This lens gives very sharp images wide open. It's sometimes, occasionally, I found it hard to nail focus, and I did miss focus once or twice, but when I got focus right, I could see that this is a very, very sharp optic. Indeed, it's easily the equal of later 135s. I'm not going to say it's the sharpest 135 I've shot, because I really don't know whether it is, but what I do know is it's a very sharp lens even from wide open, and you can shoot it wide open all day long and really not see not much softness anyway in your image. It's a very sharp lens for a vintage lens, and that was very impressive. It gives crisp, clear detail, everything's very clearly delineated. A very impressive performance on the in the area of sharpness. And of course the counterpoint to sharpness is background blur. What's the quality of the background blur like? Well, now this lens, the Orastor, or I should say the Pentacon in this case, is famous for giving very, very beautiful blur. It has very, very few harsh spots. It's almost all smooth. For a vintage lens, that's incredible. This is one of the very, very few vintage lenses I've shot that can pull off the trick of keeping its background blur pleasing, soft, not collapsing into harshness or breaking down into sort of a difficult feeling background blur with a touch of unpleasantness, a touch of harshness in it. It never seems to do that. Blur is consistently soft, consistently beautiful. It makes beautiful bubbles in the background. It makes beautiful shapes in the blur if there's any straight lines or shapes. Straight lines are a really difficult thing for background blur to handle quite often, and many lenses do fall apart when they're trying to handle straight lines in the background blur. This one doesn't. This one keeps it together, and that's really, really impressive. It has very, very beautiful blur indeed, and you could make many a nice portrait with this lens. It's an absolutely ideal portrait lens. Colour is beautiful too. This lens gives stunning colours with a palette all its own. This lens has an identity and a character, and one of the things that creates that character are its unique colours. They're just fantastic, they're extraordinary. It's probably on the warm side. This lens is a little on the warm side. I wouldn't say it was a cool lens as such. Seems to be a little more pushed towards the red end of things rather than the blue end of things. But those colours are just unlike any I've ever seen. I don't know if it comes from the coatings. I don't know if some sort of special glass was supplied by the old Maya works, whether it was still in stock. I don't know, but these are very beautiful, very, very unusual colours. I would say they have a slightly filmy quality, but that's a very imprecise term. How can I describe them? They're light, but they're also saturated. They're delicate, yet they also have body and strength and punch, and they're just very, very beautiful. If you want a really nice cheap lens that can do very, very beautiful colours, this is the one, make no mistake. Pentacon 2.8 135. But it has to be shaped like this, because there is a later Pentacon lens that you can get. So it has to be this shape with a slightly wider middle, sort of a grenade, almost a grenade sort of shape. The later lens was straight, like this one, like this Helios is dead straight. Well, now this Pentacon has just this little waist here in the center and gives it a very slight sort of grenade type profile. This is the Pentacon lens you want. There were two. This is the one you want. It's an M42 mount. It will mount to any mirrorless camera with an adapter, of course, or indeed it will mount to any M42 film camera as well. So this is a lens that you shouldn't have any trouble in mounting at all. Minimum focus distance is a reasonably long, some number of meters or feet. Yeah, reasonably long, 1.6 meters. So that's about 5 feet-ish. So it's a fairly long minimum focus distance, but it doesn't matter too much because this is a long lens, so you can get close to your subject without actually being physically close to your subject. So I'd say that's an entirely usable and practical minimum focus distance. I'm very, very pleased I've found this lens. I'd wanted to try it for some time. It's one I hadn't got around to searching out and actually buying in and of itself, but serendipity has brought it to me, so there we are, and it's also brought it to you as well. So I hope that it is favourably received, because it's a very, very nice piece of glass. As to what I'm going to do with it, I'm going to keep it and I'm going to go on shooting with it. It's too nice to get rid of. I wouldn't get very much for it if I sold it, and it's just a really nice lens. If you shoot it into the sun, contrast drops. It does have good contrast, but if you shoot it into the sun, predictably, contrast drops. It does give you some nice flares, though I couldn't seem to get a pure and clear flare with this one. I'm not quite sure whether it was my fault, whether I was angling it wrong, or whether it's an inherent quality of the lens, but I couldn't get that nice sort of streak of a flare across the shot. And it ended up being rather foggy when I tried to do that. So it doesn't like shooting into the sun. It came with a metal hood. I don't know where it's gone now, but it has a little metal hood that it came with. And I think it is best used with that, because this is an old lens. It's not a new design by any means. And that big front element will catch the rays, and contrast will drop if the sunlight catches your lens at the wrong angle. So there we are. That's been my photographic adventures for this week. I've got a lens that I need to fix. That's this Minolta. Good luck to me in getting that rear element out. I'll let you know how it goes, and I'll bring you an update on whether I've been able to repair this lens or not. I may or may not get around to shooting this little Vivitar. It's a nice little thing, but it is just a point and shoot, and I don't know, it'll probably go in the back of a drawer somewhere, most likely, and be found again in another 40 years. The Mamiya lens, I would like to use this. If you know how to adapt it, let me know. And of course, lastly, the special lens, the Pentacon 135mm f2.8, aka the Maya Optic Gorlitz Orestor 135mm f2.8, and that is a very long lens name. So if you're looking for a nice 135 2.8, this could very well be the lens for you. They go for about 30 quid on eBay, and they're well worth having a go with if you're looking for this kind of lens. So having said that, that is about it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate everybody who watches. And if you've enjoyed this show, then why not chuck us a sub? That would be appreciated too. Many, many thanks to subscribers for your support. That is a genuine heartfelt thanks. Many thanks for that. And many, many thanks to patrons for your support. That is a genuine heartfelt thanks to you. If you enjoy the content on this channel, you think, yeah, maybe this hippie is not doing too bad a job of keeping this old gear alive, you might want to become a patron yourself over at www.patreon.com/Zenography, and you can become a patron from $1 per month, and I don't think that's going to break anybody's bank. Everybody can afford that. So many, many thanks to everybody who's watched, who's given thanks, super thanks, or engaged with the channel in any way. And as for me, that is it from me for now. And if you're not doing anything too difficult, troublesome, bothering, or annoying, next week is around this time, please do join me for another spot of Zenography. Cheerio all.